Hey everybody, welcome to another Anita's Live Stitch Out. Today we're going to be doing the Halloween votive bags. I see a bunch of you are already in here ready to rock and roll with us. So just to let you know how today is going to work. I'm going to show you how to do the technique for the block itself. And so you'll be able to do that along with me. We've then pre-recorded a video where Brooke is going to show you how to take your two blocks from the two hoopings and sew them together to make the votive bag. All right, so we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to save some talking points and stuff for once we get on these longer stitches, the free motion and the satin stitch itself. But essentially, we're going to be doing the file out of the Anita's Express Halloween votive bags, which came out in September 2016, which you can get right now for $10 off by going to our website with the click below, rather, $20. So this one is going to be Design Hall Votive 6. We're essentially doing the ghost one that is here, the same that's on this bag, just a different color. And we're going to be going through these steps. I'm going to show you what makes this unique. I first kind of prototyped this type of collection many, many years ago. And so this is revisiting an old friend for me. While I'm getting this set up, let's start off with giving a prize, because I know you early birds to this would like that. So you can go ahead and type in Ghost in the comments, and Lauren, behind the scenes, will pick a winner here in just a few for a $20 gift card. What's that?
At random.
At random, of course. She has no favorites. Of course, you can't also pay her with Cash App to get a bribe. All right, so I've got my design loaded here. I'm ready to roll. The first step of what we're going to do, and what I want to mention is you always want to follow along with not only the number steps. So I've got the number steps pulled here, but you also want to use your picture steps as well. And this is going to help you because, and I'll point out as we go, there are things in the number steps that aren't descriptive enough to actually get you through this doing it properly that the picture steps will aid you with if it's your first time. So first thing first we're going to do is the squaring stitch. I'm going to go ahead and get that stitching right now. And the squaring stitch, since we're essentially making a quilt block, and I'll explain about our quilt blocks in a bit, a squaring stitch is the first stitch of any quilt block. The way ours work is we only hoop our no-show mesh cutaway stabilizer, which is in the materials list of the tutorial. And unlike traditional quilting methods, we're not actually hooping the fabric along with it. We're also not going to be using batting in this for reasons that'll be obvious when I explain it. But we're not going to be using batting in this because we want it to be clear so you can see through, and put a battery-operated candle in here. I did prototype an actual flame candle unsuccessfully, so don't try. All right, so once we've done our squaring stitch, which, can they see on the camera too, actually? See if you guys can hop in there. So
We have our winner.
Oh, let's go ahead and announce that winner then.
Pam Atkins.
Pam Atkins, you are the winner. Congratulations. If you'll go ahead and, can they shoot us a message on this, Lauren?
Customer experience.
Yeah, thank you. If you'll email us at customerexperience@anita-gooddesign.com, they will go ahead and get that $20 gift card to use on our website for any digital product out to you immediately. All right, so for all of you following along, you can see here we have our squaring stitch. Got a good view there for you. So that's the squaring stitch. That's it. Pretty simple. But what does this tell us? It tells me exactly where I need to place my actual base fabric, which Lauren's pre-prepped for me. I'm using right here. Thank you, Lauren.
You're welcome.
Setting me up for success. I'm going to go ahead and put that in there nice and flat. Make sure that there's no wrinkles or anything in the middle. And we'll run step 2 of our design, which, following the number steps, is our tacking stitch. So we'll go ahead and drop that and tack it on down. Now, when I mentioned you want to follow along with the picture steps as well, let's see here, get to the beginning, which I put over here. The picture steps are extremely handy because when we say something like a squaring stitch or a tacking stitch, it's basically showing you a picture of those terminologies. So the picture steps are lettered because they're not actually corresponding with the numbers on the machine. I say this all the time, but the machine doesn't do everything for you yet. I know some of you are waiting for those models, but we still have to do a lot of things with our hands. So because of that, and there's added steps in the picture steps that are not part of the machine steps, that's why those are lettered. And referencing those as you're going along is going to help you. And I always say, if you're new to this, use in tandem the number steps and the picture steps. So now that we've run our tacking stitch, which is basically right on top of that squaring stitch all the way around, we're going to go ahead and refer back to our number steps here. And number 3 is the marking stitch, then place clear vinyl. So we'll go ahead and look over here at the picture steps, and you can see on the picture steps, we're basically just going to run a marking stitch that's going to eventually show us where to trim. The reason we're doing it this way, you might be asking, well, what about the fabric behind the vinyl? Well, before we trim out that fabric and that stabilizer to give us a clear picture window all the way through, we want to create something that's going to act like a stabilizer in its stead. So first we're going to use this marking stitch, or a placement stitch really, to know where to actually place the vinyl itself, which it will show you. There we go. In step D, we can go ahead and use the marking stitch. That gives us the ability to trim out the fabric as this marking stitch is running. Then E is basically showing you how well we trimmed it, is all that is. You always want to make sure, if you're doing a standard satin finish, as is on these guys, that you're getting about as close to the tack stitch as you can. All right, so referring back to my number steps, I can see it's telling me I'm on step 4 on the machine, but I know there's more things to do before I run the next step. Because in the number steps, it just tells me marking stitch, then place clear vinyl, but there's more to it in the picture steps. That's why, if you're new, you want to use them in tandem. So now we've done step C in the picture steps. Step D is telling us to trim the fabric away from the inside of the placement lines. I would recommend that if you are new to this, you don't want to trim all the way through and cut your stabilizer, because it still has to tack down the vinyl. And without a stabilizer or something there in between, it's just going to risk pulling, essentially, and not tack or stitch exactly where you want it to.
Hey, Brian, we got a couple questions.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Can you let them know which number design you're on?
Yes, absolutely. To re-reference, we are in Design Hall Votive 6 in the tutorial for the Halloween votive bags. That is the Ghost one on the page here.
And then also, if they didn't have vinyl, could they just use organza is one of the questions.
I'm getting a question, if you do not have the clear vinyl, which, by the way, in the materials list, we generally use a medium 8-gauge vinyl, no thicker than an 8-gauge. If you don't have the vinyl, you can certainly test it, but I don't think it's really going to hold up well, because we're using the vinyl as a stabilizer instead of the no-show mesh. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we get to those steps in it. It is a very good question, but vinyl is very sheer and the weave is very weak. So as we go to start doing some of those things like the satin stitch or the additional free motion around the design itself, that's creating pull within the hoop. And that vinyl, or excuse me, just organza by itself with no actual stabilizer behind it, in my eyes, is just going to come apart. I didn't even prototype that, but that's just my educated guess on, or after rather, ruining a lot of designs over the years. So I would say no, don't do it without the vinyl, but you're more than welcome to try. Maybe if you layer up 3-4 layers of organza maybe. But you also want it to be kind of a clear window so that battery-operated candle flame can actually shine through it and create the Halloween lantern effect that you'll get with these bags, which make great gifts, by the way. So let's see here. We've trimmed the inside just as in the picture that you can see from steps E in your actual picture steps. So if you're following along, again, we're using the number steps from Design Hall Votive 6, which is a ghost. And we're also using the picture steps Now, the picture steps are of a different design, but that doesn't matter. The technique is the same, and that's what you're referencing it for. So once again, we've trimmed out the inside. You can reference the pictures to see how close we got. And before I put it all the way back in the hoop, I'm going to take my clear vinyl and completely cover the object, whatever it is. If you're following along and you're doing a different design, you're just covering the initial marking stitches in the entire area that we just trimmed out. Again, if you are newer to this and you can't quite tell if you're cutting only through the top layer or the bottom layer, using a seam ripper at first and picking at it, you'll eventually kind of feel the difference between whether or not you're actually cutting all the way through or just a top layer of fabric. So before I press go, we're going to return. Our machine says we're on step 4. I've placed my clear vinyl as it instructed on the previous step. I've done everything that the picture steps are asking. So step 4 is the tacking stitch, then trim clear vinyl and place organza after this step. Now don't get ahead of me because there's more to it than that. So,
Brian, will you take that purple bag and
absolutely. Anyway, so as we are organize that, you can tell that I always keep everything nice and organized as I'm stitching. But as we're doing that, as I mentioned, we want to get back to the proper steps here. In rather referencing the picture steps, we've done E, which is trim out the actual fabric. We did F, which was place the vinyl on there. In the picture steps continuing, G is saying we're on the next step, which is the tacking stitches of vinyl, which is what just finished up. Then H in the picture steps, as well as the number step 4 itself in the tutorial, are telling us to go ahead and trim the excess vinyl from around the marking stitches. Now, it helps to trim your vinyl a bit bigger than the actual marking stitch itself, so you have something to grab onto, because remember, it's clear vinyl, and if it's really close to what you're doing, then it may be hard to see if you've actually trimmed it properly. You could use an electric cutter if yours is equipped to cut through the thickness of this and pre-cut your vinyl applique out, if you like. Let's see here. Just going around and trimming that. But if you'll notice, in the number step, it said trim the vinyl and then add organza. But there's another step involved in that, which we'll get to. Because as we're going through the picture steps, you know, I'm doing F right now in the picture steps. And then G, flip these, is showing that we've tacked it. H is showing that we're going to trim and remove the hoop in I, and then turn it over, and using a seam ripper and scissors, trim only the stabilizer away, making sure we don't actually cut through the vinyl. Now, we're going to go ahead and do that first after I'm done trimming this. Yes, Lauren has a question?
tell them what thickness of vinyl we use?
Yeah, absolutely. So to reiterate, once again, the thickness of vinyl that we're using, for those of you tuning in, is a medium gauge vinyl. So no thicker than an 8 gauge. Not quite as thick as what my grandma used to keep on the couch when me and my siblings would come over and try to destroy her things. But you can generally find these. A lot of fabric and quilt shops will have these. So I always recommend checking with your dealer first, where you normally get your supplies, to see if they have it. If they don't, say, is this something you could source as well? Always helps to try to keep business local so that they can stay in business, so that you have a local place to go get stuff from. All right, now that I've trimmed my vinyl, just double check and make sure it's close enough all the way around. The reason we're making sure it's close enough is, once again, looking at the finished product, we're finishing with that satin stitch around the edge. It's just aesthetic. You don't really want to have a messy look of things coming out of your actual satin stitch. So I always like to trim as close as possible. And I like using curved tip scissors. My favorites are double curved tip, because my hand will punch the hoop otherwise, but some of you love your snips. Those are perfectly fine as well. So back to the picture steps. And I will spend more time explaining things in depth once we get on the longer stitches. And remember that this video will be here. So don't try to keep up with me if you're really new to this. Watch it all the way through. Go back and rewatch it so you can pause at your own pace. So we've done what step H is referring to, which is remove the hoop from the machine, trim the excess vinyl. Now we're going to turn the hoop over. And to make sure that I don't actually cut through the vinyl itself, I'm going to take my seam ripper and I'm going to gently poke through to where it feels like I'm not actually grabbing the vinyl. If you've been doing this a while and you're really familiar with a seam ripper, you'll know how to feel the difference in weight of what you're picking at, whether or not you're grabbing a lot of material or just what you're aiming for. If you don't know that feeling yet, you'll know pretty soon. That was something I got very used to in my first couple years here at Need a Good Design when I was running machines in the creative department and stitching out all of these designs that you guys know and love. The very first design collection we did was something like this, if I'm not mistaken. Was one of the ones I worked on back in the day, and I'm pretty sure I wrote the tutorial for it, was Autumn Votive Bags, which is a favorite. But, of course, we have another special for you involving this technique, which is it's an Easy Express, just like the one we're doing, which is the Christmas votive bags, as you can see here, because it is time to start prepping for Christmas as well, especially if you want to give these away as gifts. You'll see how quick and easy they are after you do it once or twice. But that one is on sale right now for 50% off on the website, so discounted from $30 all the way down to $15 for you. And once again, to reiterate the special on what we're doing now, the Anita's Express Halloween votive bags, that is discounted. If you want to get this project and do it because you're watching this video now or later, currently that is discounted at $10 off from $30 all the way down to $20 for you. Yes, Lauren?
Can you just remind our All Access members that this was not included in All Access at 2016?
Yeah, absolutely.
They would have had to purchase it separately to have it.
Correct. So back in 2016, we had not included our Anita's Express into All Access. Remember, our All Access includes all of our standard release retail collections. It generally does not come with educational material that we design for classes. Those are extra, like our universities that we're doing right now and have been doing for a while. And this was actually, all our Anita's Express was initially created as a workshop that dealers could host in their actual shops. So we did not start including those until, I believe it was January of 17.
Yes.
Yeah, January of 17 is when we started including those because we got a lot of emails from our customers requesting that. So we made that available for All Access members in January, but anything prior to that was not in All Access. You would have had to have purchased it separately or got it as a free gift or something at an event. All right, so as you can see here, and actually let me hold it up to the camera so we can show them. After basically trimming everything, you can see that I've, before we even put that vinyl down in the previous steps, I trimmed away the top fabric. And as it shows in the actual picture steps, I put the vinyl down, I trimmed that just so you can kind of see how close I'm trimming. Then we removed the hoop and we trimmed the stabilizer only from the back, which again the materials list is available for you in the tutorial. That way, our vinyl is now acting as a stabilizer. We can put our organza down and any stitching we do after this step is still going to be stable in terms of the drawing in, etc. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and rest that back on my machine, go back to these picture steps and number steps. So we just completed step I in the picture steps. And what's the letter that comes after I? Let's see. As I'm fishing for this, I think I might have mixed it up, but I never do anything like that. Disorganize myself. There we go. So after we finish I, we're going to J, because Lauren reminded me of what the alphabet is. So J is showing you the example of how the stabilizer looks, which is what I was just showing you in the actual camera there. K is telling us turn the hoop back over and place the organza over the design area. So we've already got our organza here. We've got a big piece. We're only going to use one layer of organza because we do want that light to shine through really well. So that one layer is going to maximize that. Now it is a big piece, so I'm just going to use a corner of it so we have scraps for later, because Lauren's making these gifts for everybody this year. All right. And again, you're just covering the area that the initial marking stitches were, which essentially is the entire ghost. Everything that we've cut out so far, put the vinyl on, etc. So now that we've done K, I can refer back to the number steps. When you're new, I always recommend in classes and in these videos to always look at the step on your machine. I see that I'm on step 5. I always go back and reread my previous step. So step 4 was the tacking stitch for the vinyl, then trim it and place organza. I know between the number step and the picture step, my organza is placed, which is why I did that. And then 5 is the tacking stitch, then trim organza. So we'll go ahead and tack that down. Feel free to use tape at home. We like using the pink embroidery tape that's made for fabrics. It sticks to fabrics really well. The adhesive is meant for it. And the adhesive is also better than what you will find when using things like painter's tape, for instance. Because painter's tape is used in the actual picture here. But pink embroidery tape's a lot better. It's just I'm pretty comfortable with my hands around the needle. I learned from Lauren what not to do, which is put your finger under the needle. Not to call you out, Lauren.
It's okay.
In fact, let's give away a prize since I just called out Lauren like that. If you'll type in finger in the comments, we'll give away another $20 digital gift card to use on our website. Finger in the comments, and Lauren will randomly pick a winner. As you're typing that in, it's done the actual tack down stitch. I know from the number step I need to go ahead and trim my organza rather, because step 5 said tacking stitch, then trim organza, which is why I recommend always going back and rereading the previous step. These steps that we're rereading didn't happen too long ago because they're quick embroidery steps, but sometimes you'll be on an embroidery run for quite some time, and if you don't go back and reread the step, you may miss what you should have done before the next step. So as I'm trimming up this organza, of course you can also reference your picture steps in here as well, which is currently M, showing you how to trim that up. No different than how we've trimmed everything else up until this point. Get as close to that tack down stitch as you can. You'll find the organza trims much quicker. And as a tip, this is why I like using curved tip, because organza is very delicate, and straight tip scissors tend to go slightly inside and will catch the organza and rip it. The curve helps you get in those intricate cuts at the tip of the scissors without actually damaging the fabric you're trying to avoid cutting. Lauren, did you have any other questions or comments?
No, nothing. They're just all typing finger, which we have a winner.
We have a winner for finger.
We do. It is Kim Busker.
Kim Busker, you are the finger winner. You are the winner of a $20 gift card. We will not be sending out any fingers. If you'll email customerexperience@anita-gooddesign.com, we'll get that on out to you. And again, those gift cards are good for our website to use on any of our digital product available. All right. Got that all trimmed up. Everything's looking good. So now I want to go ahead and refer back to my picture steps. I did M in the picture step, which was trim that organza. The tip here under M, which is what I want you to look for whenever you're in our tutorials, is when they have little indicators below the actual direction for that particular step. So again, in the picture step M, I've done what it asked, and it recommended leaving a little bit more organza outside of the tack down stitch than you normally would, just because it's very delicate and it may pull in with that satin stitch, and it could risk pulling inside of the actual tack down stitch, leaving you with a little bit of a gap. So that's what they're kind of doing there, and that tip is telling you to use 2 layers of organza to help with the tension on the fabric if you want. If you're really comfortable with trimming and you're comfortable with the quality of organza you got, then you can use one like I did. All right, so now we'll go ahead and refer to N, which is the next picture step. And that's just telling us to basically do any of the additional embroidery steps, which in this case is going to be the satin stitching, any other embroidery on there like his face, the echo stitching, which I'll talk about in a moment. So we'll go ahead and put that back in the machine. I'm going to switch my thread here, which when you're going for the thread colors, we put in here on step 6, 483. That's just what we used on the one you're seeing in the picture. You can use whatever color you want. 483 in this case is referring to a Floriani color number, which would be more of a grayish silver. I'm using a white for mine and a different pattern and slightly different color orange fabric as well. Now, Lauren, you guys used felt in the tutorials, is that correct?
We did.
So yeah, they decided to go ahead and use felt in the tutorial, which you surely can. It'll give more of a quilted look just because it's a thicker, more piley fabric rather.
Will you let them know that we're going to get the Christmas link updated? It's not showing up on sale, but will in 2 minutes.
Absolutely. Lauren just informed me that the Christmas link is not showing up for sale. She went to go make sure that they fix that on the web end right now. So we'll have that up and running for you, and I'll let you know in just a moment when they do. All right, so we've gone ahead and started step 6, which was the satin stitch for the ghost. And to go back to the beginning of the tutorial, when I was talking about step 1 of this design, the squaring stitch, I was mentioning that that is the first step to doing any quilt block. At Need a Good Design, we just basically, to create a quilt block, only hoop our stabilizer because we use a paint by numbers approach to create anything we do. So it's kind of like using a placement stitch or a guide stitch to show you where to put base fabric, batting, any appliques you're doing. We'll use marking stitches to help you place 3D objects you might have done in a previous hooping. So being able to have a digitized program to utilize a stitch to show you where to place things not only saves on the guesswork, but it saves on waste. Because traditionally, to make this quilt block, we would essentially have to hoop the no-show mesh and fabric in the same hooping, which leads to added waste of fabric. And a lot of you don't like wasting your fabric. You want to get as much yield out of it as possible. So to do that, we do the squaring stitch. Now in any quilt block, a squaring stitch is the outermost stitch of your design. And that's very important in certain types of quilt blocks because that tells us where our seam allowance is. Anything outside of that squaring stitch is our seam allowance. You will always want to leave for quilt blocks about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And they're going to go over that in more detail in the next video itself in terms of how to finish these blocks and sew them all together, which Brooke did, and we'll go over that again at the end. But the point is that if I'm not doing a single piece of fabric, and say that I'm doing a block that has a lot of layers of fabric for the background, such as a landscape scene. Well, some of that fabric may not extend all the way out of the entire squaring stitch. So some of it will need to be trimmed. And that's important because if there's excess fabric inside the actual squaring stitch that has not been trimmed, then it's loose fabric. And on home machines, no matter what the brand, the presser foot rides low. And if you don't trim that excess fabric inside the squaring stitch where applicable, it can go underneath it, stitch it to the actual presser foot and pull your whole design out of the hoop. If that's not quite making sense to you and you need a visual reference, I assure you'll run into that issue. I've done that plenty of times. And Lauren, they working on it currently? Okay, sounds good. So yeah, she just went and let them know they're working on getting that Christmas file for the Anita's Express Christmas votive bags up for you so that you can not only do the Halloween one, which is coming up in a month, but the Christmas as well. Hey, Lauren, she was just looking for you. All right, so back to this. we're running that satin stitch currently. You may notice as you're running yours, it goes through and it does a really wide zigzag stitch first. It'll do like a line around it and then a zigzag stitch. It's basically an underlay stitch. It's going to help your satin stitch sit on top and also keep it from unraveling as well. So it really creates a bold look for the satin stitch, and that's part of the digitizing that we do. Of course, we're using digitizing software, but we still draw all this by hand. For those of you who are digitizers out there, we really don't ever use what's known as a seal stitch, which is essentially, in digitizing software, I can just draw a line and turn it into a satin stitch that's a specific width, and it's a perfect width, but the corners and turns don't always look good. Sometimes we'll use that actual steel stitch as a guide to trace back over and hand place all of our stitches for the satin stitch so that the width is perfect, but we can control how the turns go. So that's part of the quality control we do here to need a good design to make these come out so beautiful every single time. And the satin stitch is almost done, then I know it's going to go on and do the actual rest of the face itself. In here, and I just want to go through the tutorial as it's finishing this up. When you first get this, and if you haven't already because you're just watching this with me, you know, your tutorial, whether you have the older version that has the printed tutorial, or if you're doing the digital version, you'll have the front page, of course, which shows about it. It goes through the iconology, which if you're not aware, a lot of our actual software has these icons at the bottom of it. It shows you what techniques are involved in it. It also goes through and gives you an introduction about it, basically an anatomy of the design, essentially, breaking down the different parts. Goes over your materials and notions list, which is just a few pages in. So if you haven't gotten this yet or just got it, the whole materials list is right there for you. Now it's a general list because the design you may pick to do, whether it's the skull or the actual ghost, is going to require different sizes of vinyl or organza. So that's where those placement stitches come in, or the marking stitch itself for the ghost, because I can run that stitch, take my ruler, hold it over it, and I know exactly how much fabric or vinyl or whatever it is to pre-cut, which also saves on waste. Again, going back to that paint by numbers approach I was talking about a moment ago. All right, so it finished step 6, and again, step N in the actual picture steps is what I'm doing right now. So step 7 is they used color 755. Pick what matches your fabric. And I'm going to talk about that when this goes. It's like, how do we pick colors and fabric here at Anita Good Design? Well, you can go with what we have in the book, but that thread we're using for this echo stitch was picked to match the fabric that they chose to use. So I'm going to thread this here and get this running. So currently running step 7 for those of you following along, which is the final step of this design, the echo stitch. And I'll talk about that again, or that rather, in a moment as well. But essentially the way we pick colors here, and the way we recommend you pick colors, is always get your fabrics first. It is much easier to go to an actual quilt shop and find the fabrics you like first, then go to a thread rack and find coordinating colors to pull in with it, than it is to go to a thread rack, pick some colors, and wander around the whole fabric shop finding fabric to match. So that's what we do here all the time, because you see how much we put out in a month, and there'd be no way we'd be able to do that if we basically tried to just find fabric to match the threads we have on hand. Instead, people out in the creative department will have fabrics ordered through the creative director or whoever's running that current design. When those fabrics come in, that's when they'll take it over to the thread rack and start pulling colors based on however many the digitizers decided to add in when they did it to go along with it. So that's what I mean by when you're looking at the colors we put in there, that's just a reference on exactly what we used to do it based on the fabric colors we have. So for you, I recommend getting your fabrics and just using the colors you like. You don't have to get stuck on what we put in the book. However, if you're doing something like a tile scene or something that's realistic stitch, that's when the colors we use could really help you bring to life whatever it may be, whether it's like our Last Supper tile scene or something like that, because we give you a swatch list of the fabrics we use so you can generally get close to the color. And then we give you the full threads list as well so that you can go through and actually create the entire scene or whatever it may be that's realistic stitch using the same colors and fabrics that are pretty close to what we used. Because as you know, fabrics change with the wind. What you get one month may not be there the next, so always plan accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Lauren if you guys have any general questions. Feel free to put them out there to her. Don't worry, we'll be doing some more prizes here in just a few. But to talk more about this design itself, while any of you are posing any questions potentially, this guy right here, pretty simple to do. You'll see in the remaining of the instructions as well as the video that we have posted down below where Brooke is going to walk you through on finishing this whole thing, is we basically just taking two of the same quilt block. So we're going to run this design twice. And she's going to show you how to sew it all together in that tutorial. Once it's sewn all together, sits up perfectly. That's where your little candles can go. These things make great decor. Oh, thank you very much. Perfect. Such as this guy right here. And I will reiterate, not to use an actual flame candle, battery operated. We want to be safe here. One thing I do want to point out that I noticed when I was first doing this was there is I'll flip it right side out for you. On the inside, and you'll see how this is done in the next video, but I'm just talking about it now. You see how they have that seam allowance inside? May make it a little hard for the candle to sit there. And likewise, you may want your candle to sit up a bit higher inside of it, depending on the height of what you're using. So you can always use something inside to rest it on, like a little metal candle stand or something like that. I like words. But using these in the dark, of course it's well lit in here, will glow for you just like a jack-o'-lantern would, so to speak. Oh yeah, that's right. Thank you for reminding me about that. We also, for the ghost here, this is a lot of fun to use. I remember when we first experimented with this 5 or 6 years ago, we got glow-in-the-dark thread, and that's what we used for the actual satin stitching on the ghost itself. So it will glow in the dark. If you've never played with it before, it's a lot of fun to play with. So I do recommend getting some. Again, check with your local store that you normally get your supplies from, sewing shop, quilt shop, etc. See if they have it, see if they can source it before you go online or try to get it anywhere else. But the glow-in-the-dark thread just adds to it. So on a dark and stormy night during the month of Hallows Eve, or Halloween, I guess it's only Hallows Eve on the night before, this thing will shine bright for you. Keep it out on your porch with the battery-operated candle that will cause you no problems. And if you come up with creative ways to get yours to sit inside without using any type of standoff, let us know in the comments, because this will be on our YouTube page for people to watch in the future. And I'll be able to go back and see any comments we pinned that we liked, etc. Speaking of which, as you may have noticed, we've redone a lot with our YouTube page, and we're starting to stream our videos live through YouTube because it reaches far more people, because anybody can access it for free without even having to sign in, essentially. You can just go to YouTube and not sign in. Me personally, I pay monthly for YouTube because I just don't like the advertisements, and I can listen to it without having to have my phone on. But you can watch it on your smart TV, your tablet, your computer, your phone. So many ways to get to it. And when you go to YouTube, of course you found us right now, but if that was found through a link and you type in "Anita Good Design," or if you're telling a friend, make sure you go to where it says Anita Good Design. Don't click the ads or anything else like that. When you go to us, make sure you subscribe. Then you'll see a little bell icon. When you click that bell icon, it will actually notify you through whatever device you're using or however you choose to, that we've released a new video. So you'll get notified every time we post a new video on our page. So why don't you go ahead and do that right now. Hit the thumbs up button down below to like this video. That way it can reach more people, because that's how YouTube basically markets. As the more likes we get, the more it pushes it out to your fellow sewers and quilters. When you click subscribe, of course you'll be subscribed to us, and clicking that notification bell once again will let you know whenever we've posted a new video. That, however, will require you to just sign in, but it's free to sign in and create a YouTube account. You don't have to pay for anything, you just get ads whenever you're watching a pre-recorded video. All right, so it's going through and doing the last step right now, which is the echo stitch. You can see the pictures in the tutorial, but the echo stitch itself is from a type of quilting known as Hawaiian quilting. And all it is a quilting stitch. So typically in traditional quilting, you would do this in lieu of stippling, for instance, or a diamond quilt pattern, whatever quilt pattern you like to use. And this echo stitch does a series of bean stitches all the way around the actual design element, whatever it may be. And then it does another one after that, and another one after that. So it essentially looks like ripples in a pond, or an echo, which is why it's called echo stitching. Lauren, anybody have any questions that you'd like to address?
We had a question, do they have to have the organza? I can't remember.
So we have a question, do you have to have the organza? We used the organza because it does create a slight sheer effect. So if your candle is sitting up, it's not like a picture perfect window to where you clearly see the candle. It also helps spread the light. So instead of having like a, let me grab this scrap vinyl. Instead of just seeing like a candle right behind the vinyl, it just helps mask it a bit, so that when the actual organza is on top, or two layers, if you use the tip in the tutorial, it basically helps diffuse the light, so it kind of shines it a little bit brighter, and it hides the candle a little bit. It's an aesthetic reason, which I can't believe I actually remembered that was the reason why we used that 6 years ago when I originally, or last did this design in autumn votive bags, but that's why we use the organza. You can do it without the organza if you want to. Because the vinyl itself is acting as the stabilizer there, and it will be perfectly fine otherwise. The one thing you have to keep in mind is that when we use vinyl, we do digitize for it. Now that organza is adding a little bit of body to, and I say a little bit because it's organza, to the vinyl to help keep it from perforating essentially. And what do I mean by that? Well, vinyl is a non-woven material. When you stitch through anything, the needle on a satin stitch is generally pretty close to the next needle. And those needle marks on a non-woven material isn't going between a weave, it's puncturing a solid material, in this case vinyl. Having those needle marks really close together can actually perforate the vinyl and cause it to fall out. We generally loosen the density of our satin stitches we would normally use on fabric when we are actually doing a solid material such as vinyl. This is actually a bit denser of a satin stitch than what we would use on vinyl only applications, since we are using the organza on top. But I have run this without organza when I was prototyping it, and it did hold up fine with the density they used. It's just that that's how we actually digitize for vinyl. So in other words, you can't just use vinyl in lieu of a regular applique in anything. You have to keep in mind that the density of the stitches you're putting on top will determine whether or not that vinyl is just going to fall right out or actually work and stay in as the applique itself. Hopefully I answered that and then reiterated some other points well enough. As this is stitching, let's give away another final prize here as it's rounding the bend for another $20 gift card. This one would be challenging for me because I can't spell, but type in Votive in the comments below. Lauren will pick a random winner here as soon as we're done with this echo stitch. Votive in the comments below. And speaking of which, YouTube is a great place to come as we're adding more and more and more videos for free for your customers to watch. You're going to notice that the comments section is a place where you can come and see things we may have pinned to the top for suggestions from your fellow community members. You'll see links from things we refer to in there. You'll also be able to engage with each other in the comments or go back and see any tips or tricks or ideas people have posted in there. So even when you're watching older videos, the comments section's great. Plus, when you do comment, it also helps support the YouTube algorithm that pushes our video out to more people. So we can get more people involved in the hobby and passion that you've come to know and love. And finally, for those of you who actually have a home cottage or a home business, you are able to make and sell our designs, where we're not like some other places where you're not allowed to resell anything you make. I won't name names, but you're allowed to stitch out and make 50 of these individual ghost votive designs before you even need to think about contacting us for licensing. So in this one actual Anita's Express by itself, there were 10 designs in here, right, Lauren? Yeah, there's always 10. I just want to make sure. This was an older one. There were 10 designs, so you could essentially make more than you could probably sell on an individual basis, whether or not you do your home cottage and sell it on eBay or Etsy, or whether or not you go to trade shows or local, or maybe you have a booth at a little market or something like that. You can make and resell these things, which a lot of our customers do. Yes, Lauren?
We have our winner,
We have our winner. What is that?
Sharon Skelly.
Sharon Skelly, you are the next winner for this live stitch out here with Anita Good Design and myself, Brian. Well, if you go ahead and email us at customerexperience@anita-gooddesign.com. Is that posted down below? Okay, we have it posted down below just to make sure you get the spelling of Anita Good Design right. Oftentimes people misspell it. Send us an email there and we'll send that digital gift card to use on our website, anitagooddesign.com, where you can use it on any of our digital product at your leisure. All right. Finally, we have completed our design here. Now, this is just one hooping. You're going to want to do this again. So if you've completed this with me now, go ahead and stitch the next hooping the exact same way, same colors if you like, aesthetically. And then refer to the video below where Brooke is going to show you how to put it all together. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for this live stitch out with Anita Good Design, and we'll see you next time.